As the astronaut explores the planet after landing on it, he discovers that it was formerly home to human life until an unforeseen event occurred. The goal of Project Connection, which was launched 60 years ago, was to establish contact with the closest planet thought to support intelligent life. Named Machine 1 and Machine 2, two machines were constructed and placed in orbit around the planet. Once Machine 2 reached its target, which was 20 light-years away from its original planet, a spatial link was formed between the two machines that let items to go through. It's time to send a human mission for reconnaissance, now that a probe has been dispatched to the other planet to test the devices. Captain James, the astronaut, gets aboard his ship and gets ready to go via Machine 1. He prepares for the travel by making a few last tweaks to his trajectory. James's spaceship feels uneasy when Machine 1 comes into operation. James's body suffers throughout the trip via the space-time vortex between the two devices, however, and he is rendered comatose. Sadly, he is unconscious for much too long. His spaceship runs out of fuel after reaching the other planet via Machine 2, and it begins to descend into the planet. When the alarms go off, James hurriedly gets out of bed, puts on his spacesuit, and buckles himself into the landing module. It seems for a moment that he will land on the planet without incident, but suddenly the computer warns that the landing module's velocity is too high and it will crash. James can only be forced to go. James then wakes up on the floor. With a parachute, he made it through the landing. James stands up and looks around the globe. He sees nothing but nature all around him. Then he chooses to look toward the smoke he sees rising in the distance. When he discovers the wreckage of his landing module near the source of the smoke, his suspicions are confirmed. He is now unable to leave this world. James, distraught, counts how little food and drink he has on hand, and then checks his oxygen supply, which is also getting short. James makes the risky decision to remove his mask, since there are indications that the atmosphere of this planet is breathable. He has been validated. James then makes a radio message to his home base, informing them that he would run out of food and water in 5 days, and that he will need a rescue expedition in order to leave the planet. He continues, saying there is no indication of intelligent life on this planet, which is not what they had anticipated. James then goes to examine what sounds like the sound of a passing automobile. He searches about but finds nothing, and then realizes that all of his water has poured onto the ground since he left his water bottle open. He becomes really irritated with himself. James eats as dusk approaches and looks up at Machine 2, which is a bright spot in the sky. He is worried since by now his family members should have gotten in touch with him. James sends another radio message home the next morning, explaining that he will attempt to locate a water source today because if he doesn't, nobody will be left to save them. James hears the sound of water dropping nearby after spending many hours aimlessly strolling about. As expected, he locates a stream by following the sound. After using his apparatus to verify that the water is safe to drink, he fills his bottle. James then continues on his exploration of the area, and at one point he hears some odd noises coming from the distance. He looks around with his binoculars and sees what seems to be some kind of creature hunting animals. James turns to examine more closely, but as he does, he is seen by one of the entities. James gestures at the entity, deciding that now is the right moment to establish contact. This turns out to be a poor choice, however, as he discovers that the aliens are firing at him when bullets pass dangerously close to him. The creatures chase after him as he flees. Upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that robots rather than any living things are pursuing him. Even if he escapes them, what happened to him still shocks him. James continues to go forward in the hopes of putting as much space between himself and the robots as possible. But as he travels down the road, a big vehicle almost runs him over. As he tumbles down the side of the road, he notices a big building. In order to remain safe, he chooses to spend the night indoors. James realizes that maybe his radio messages aren't getting through, and that nobody is coming to save him when he stares up at Machine 2 in the sky at night. He reveals that he is considering a backup plan in another communication that he sends out the next morning. He now concludes that the robot's construction must have been the result of intelligent life on this planet. Therefore, they may be able to assist him in returning home if he can locate them. If help does not come, this is his only chance. James keeps exploring and decides to take a nap in the midst of the day by lying down. The sound of gunfire wakes him, and he discovers that robots are everywhere. Even the creatures he had previously seen were robot animals, he finds out. To get away from them, he goes into the woods. James spends a good deal of time wandering the woods in an attempt to get some space between himself and the robots once again. However, the robots find him just as he settles back to unwind after concluding that he is secure. As the robot shoots rounds in his direction, he runs away. James is able to evade many gunshots by hiding behind trees, but eventually one of them strikes his hand and causes an injury. James, in a state of wrath and desperate to save his own life, takes out a section of the robot with a stick. This proves to be a pivotal moment since James flees and the robot stops working correctly thereafter. After bandaging his hand wound, he collapses into a deep slumber. James then discovers the mechanical dog observing him as he wakes up. Scared, he reaches for the stick once again to take aim at the robotic dog. James understands the dog is not hostile. Nevertheless, as it does not exhibit any aggressive behavior, he concludes that the robot dog is just imitating the portion of the other robot he brought with him and knocked off. The dog follows him as he walks, holding the part in his hand. After grabbing his suitcase, which he misplaced during yesterday's gunfight, James resumes his hunt for the sentient species that built these robots. James finds a bottle of Jack Daniels while investigating the area, describing it as a container covered with alien language. It is then shown that the robot dog is wearing the flag of Great Britain. This shows that James is a visitor from another planet, actually Earth, where an unexplained incident has resulted in everything being controlled by robots. The fact that James can converse in English, but not rated, is even more puzzling. There's a lot of story convenience here. James then comes onto an ancient, deserted home and enters to find a number of antique items, such as a projector, a rifle, and a mask. He presses the projector's buttons at random until the video begins to play. In the video, a human family is having a cookout in their backyard. Abruptly, many military helicopters soar above, and a huge explosion takes place over the horizon. James then discovers a number of newspapers that detail the usage of nuclear weapons during World War I. He discovers from an image in the newspaper that people sought refuge underground from the radiation. James then plays about with the rifle he discovered, not fully understanding what it is. The pistol goes off when he unintentionally presses the trigger. After realizing it's a weapon, he packs it away. As they continue their exploration, James comes to understand that the robot dog is designed to lift large objects. The dog begins to go away when he places his backpack on it. James understands that the dog is most likely returning the box to its makers now that it has one to carry. In an attempt to locate the people along the route, he begins to follow it. James transmits a message outlining his opinion that after a horrific battle on this planet, the human population fled underground in order to survive. These days, these machines labor and serve people on the ground, finding a way into the subterranean bunkers, getting in touch with people, and using their technology to return home are his last chances of survival. James pursues the robotic dog to an area where there are many buildings, and then the dog abruptly stops. He scans the area, hoping to see the entrance to the subterranean bunker, but he doesn't find anything. The dog abruptly drops a canister, causing smoke to begin to appear. James is confused, but just then, a fighter plane appears and begins dropping bombs at the same location where the smoke is coming from. A couple drones then show up and begin shooting at James. He realizes that the dog is still in the path of fire and returns to bring it inside after running into a building to protect himself. James becomes aware that there are war robots engaged in combat all around him. He just escapes the combat zone alive after struggling to stay out of the line of fire. James then finds himself in another building, where a massive anti-aircraft gun is visible. When a fighter plane approaches, the enormous weapon opens fire on it. James had never heard anything as loud as this in his whole life. He clutches his ears in agony. At last, the weapon fires no more, and the fighter plane is struck. James eventually finds the door to one of the subterranean bunkers next to the enormous weapon. James inadvertently inhales a large amount of dust when the bunker entrance opens. He throws up. James turns on his oxygen mask and enters the subterranean bunker with what little oxygen he still has. For safety, he carries the rifle he discovered at the previous residence. James enters and discovers that he is in an underground tunnel. He cautiously makes his way far down the tunnel when he hears a robot approaching from the other side. James fires at the robot as it emerges from the shadows, but the damage is insufficient to deter the machine. James sprints out of there. James runs for a time before coming to a closed door and being stuck. As he braces himself for the worst, the robot just opens the door and passes by. James discovers a decomposing human body outside the door. James eventually gets a message from home at that precise moment. They explain to him that they were having problems communicating because Machine 2, which is circling this planet, is in a very erratic orbit. They must also return him to orbit as quickly as possible for the same reason. They are unable to forecast Machine 2's orbit, but because Machine 2 is in an erratic orbit and they are unable to send a rescue team, he will have to figure out how to go back up on his own. More rotting corpses may be seen inside what seems to be a wartime control room when James enters. He notices bodies all throughout the bunker after watching security camera video. He understands that there is no longer any chance for him to return to orbit, and that all humanity have perished. Angry, he gives the rotting bodies a shake and asks them why they done this. At that moment, he gets another signal from home, explaining that Machine 2 has been in orbit around Earth for a considerable amount of time and that they underestimated the whole operation. It was long later that they found out about its arrival at its destination. James discovers the complete truth as he turns to face a wall that is covered in newspapers and a poster. A few years before James' arrival, the introduction of Machine 2 sparked widespread fear and religious fanaticism among the Earthlings, sparking the start of World War I and the destruction of the human species. James, devastated, emerges from the subterranean bunker to see Machine 2 tumbling toward Earth from its orbit. It's utterly wrecked. He really has no method of returning home at this point. James ponders killing himself with the gun, but he is unable to pull the trigger. The story concludes with his decision to continue living his life on Earth,